we're going to discuss about audit principles. So what is audit actually, sir?
This is a basically kind of we are validating.
The different type of audits. Can you just share the viewpoint about different type of audits?
Yeah, so audit can be of three types: first party, second party, and the third party.
So how to become an auditor and what should be the ideal timeline to become an auditor to get a job?
You need to understand how a technology works at a high level.
What is structured learning to become an auditor?
So certification always helps.
Like if someone is want to look for the career in GRC audit, so how can we crack the first job? Yeah.
And they need to understand that domain very well.
If someone want to learn how to conduct an audit, what is the step?
We discuss about the planning, how to do the planning of the audit.
But is it an audit as a sustainable career option if I'm looking for my retirement? How critical is the report formatting? How critical is the language we use in reports?
So language should not be pinpointing to people.
Example?
You cannot say, okay, like this particular guy or this particular team is not working correctly.
Hi team, welcome to the session on Coffee with Prabh, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Rahul Sir. It is really required for me to courage to speak Rahul, but I cannot because he's my guru. And we already did one podcast in the past and it was a great hit. We got 10K view in our ISO implementation video. And based on that feedback only, we come up again with another podcast where we're going to discuss about audits, type of audit, and the reality of audit. Now, the benefit of this podcast is basically give you perspective about audit, type of audits, and how really audit works in the industry. And those who are people who are looking for a job in the itgc or GRC, this video can be an eye opener for them. So please welcome us, Mr. Rahul Sir, in this podcast. Rahul Sir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Suprabhat.
Hi everyone, and hi Prabh. Good morning everyone. People might watch it at any time of day, but it's our morning right now.
Exactly. It is always a morning to learn new things.
Yes. And like I follow like the first hi in the day,
Yeah.
no matter what time it is. I always say good morning.
That is great.
Savera.
Yeah. So he's just saying every day morning, every day Savera. Yeah. So sir, what is special today? Like, people know about you. You are basically known for the CISO projects, GRC projects, and you are also my guru who helped me to pass my CISSP with Shishi sir also there. If Shishi, you're watching this video, sir, you also helped me to pass this exam in KP also. But primary contributor is Rahul sir. So, sir, what is special today?
Primary contributor is always a learner.
Yeah.
If the learner will not invest time and effort, it's the success is not.
Especially
possible.
Especially the questions which has been asked in our practice session when I used to give a presentation to you. पढ़ाने से डर नहीं लगता, उस बंदे से क्वेश्चन पूछने से डर लगता है. नहीं सर, we'll never forget our roots.
Thank you so much, and it was really a nice response from the previous session as well. And thank you once again for inviting me. And I hope this session will also be equally useful for your audience. And if they can build the career, they can get a job out of after this. They understand the nitty-gritties of the audit after this. It will be really nice, and it will be really like meaningful effort for us as well.
That's great, sir. So today's session is we are going to discuss about audit, or we're going to discuss about audit principles. So what is audit actually, sir?
So audit is basically this is basically kind of we are validating how good we are performing, right? And that validation can come in three forms. Right? One is an audit, second is a review, and third is a monitoring.
Okay.
So monitoring is generally defined to be a continuous process. For example, you're performing something, I'm looking at you, and how maybe through systems, through applications, through tools, or maybe just as a human observation. So that's something monitoring is considered to be a continuous thing, and review is like more detailed. For example, you carry out something, and those documents what you are working on, or maybe any transactions, when I have to review and approve them, for example, right? So then it goes for each and every transaction. While the audit is more of a sampling-based exercise, right? We do not look at each and every instance of an activity. We pick up some samples. That samples size can be a very subjective, right?
Hmm.
Depending on the nitty-gritties of the audit, how like what is the total size of the transactions what we want to create samples for,
Hmm.
and how critical their activity is. Right?
Okay.
So audit is a sampling-based exercise which validates how effectively our processes are implemented
Hmm.
and how effectively our controls are working. That's audit.
Sir, I just want to stop here. I just want to ask you one thing. We are using a lot of technical terms here. Now, there will be some viewers who are completely new to GRC, and for them, the sampling, testing are it's like a bouncer for them. Might be.
Yeah.
So, can
Okay.
you just give us one example with that? Can you
Yeah.
explain the audit statement when you said monitoring and all that, and sampling? How to what is sampling and why we need sampling?
Okay. So sampling is basically, let's say you are doing the audit for the background check process, right?
Okay.
So if there are 100 new joiners,
Hmm.
fine. So do not look at the background check report of each and every new joiner. Fine. What you'll do is, let's say you pick up the sample of 10%.
Okay.
Out of 100, you'll pick up any random 10 samples and see whether background check is conducted appropriately or not.
How you going to
Fine.
test people?
So that you can pick up any random order, and you cannot, and that random order should be also randomized, not only in terms of sequence, alphabetical order. And it can be like, for example, out of 100 there was 30 managers, 70 executives.
Okay.
Fine. So pick up some samples from the managers group and some from the junior staff group. Right. So
Okay.
then based on that, you identify, okay, whether the managers, you should have the enough assurance
Hmm.
that the activities are being carried out as defined in my process.
Okay.
Right. That's a sampling based exercise. So sampling is like, do not look at each and every instance,
Hmm.
but yes, have an assurance by looking at few instances, have an assurance that my process is working effectively.
Okay.
That's sampling.
So, when we're talking about the criteria of validations and everything, okay, when you're talking about the requirement of parameter of sampling and all that, so as we using any other formula apart from that, or do we have any industrial metrics we are using, something like that?
No, this is very subjective because again, criticality of the like process, how
Hmm.
critical the process is, fine, and again, sometimes like we may also look into like sampling size depends upon the quantum we have. For example, if your audit has to be completed in 1 week, fine, or 5 days,
Hmm.
fine,
Hmm.
and you have like 10,000 transactions,
Hmm.
fine, you will not go for 10% even, because 10% come out to be 1,000 transactions,
Okay.
fine, and we have to complete the entire audit, fine, and
Okay.
this is one part of that one area of the complete audit of what I am talking about here. So let's say you're doing the ISMS audit, fine, and there
Okay.
are 10,000 staff, and you have to check the background check for all the 10,000 staff. That is not possible.
Okay.
When you pick up a sample of 10%, 1,000 may not be again, depending on the time what you have for the to complete the audit, that may not be again possible. So you
Okay.
may pick up a sample of maybe 50 or 100 staff members and look at if you have the assurance, yes, those samples are all good and there is no discrepancies found. And if there are discrepancies found, then probably we may look for few more samples. Again, when we talk about looking at few more samples, that should not be to find the fault of people. For example, something
Hmm.
is missed, something is a human error. That should not be a fault finding. That should be a fact finding. Or that my process is this, and if this is my process. If I look at the samples, I have to make sure that this process is being followed. This process is not failing.
Okay.
Fine. There might be human errors, fine, but that we have to ignore. Fine.
Fine.
The audit findings has to be material.
Okay.
When you talk about materials are means that it should have some substance, like it should give some kind of uh, it should be kind of having a objective is not being met here. Right? Should have
Okay.
some assurance of objective being met or objective being not being met.
So somehow
There
it is
should be some
experience matter
element of
here.
this. Yeah, there should be some element of risk you see. Right? That is again coming out to be a material, the material finding. So
Okay.
some element of risk you see is being mitigated, or is being the risk being there which remains unaddressed or unidentified.
Okay.
Right. So when we talk about again the risk, we also have to see the cost benefit. Right.
Hmm.
So what we are expecting out of the process, is it cost? It is like cost effective or not? When
Understood.
all these things together makes them a finding as a material finding.
Okay. So, sir, like, what are the, like, we talk about audits and all that. So there's always a misconception about the different type of audits. Can you just share the viewpoint about the different type of audits?
Yeah. So audit can be of three types: first party, second party, and the third party. So first party means that organization is doing audit for themselves,
Hmm.
and so they may be a separate internal audit group,
Hmm.
or they may be like some virtual group,
Hmm.
right, which like there's SMEs who understand, who may have some primary responsibilities different than the audit. But yes, whenever there's an audit cycle, maybe once in 6 months, once in a quarter, or maybe like once in a year, so they might perform the audit for the organization.
Okay.
So it doesn't need to be a dedicated group for the audit.
Hmm.
And it can be the people who have some other responsibilities. They're also equipped with the knowledge and skills to conduct the audit. So,
Okay.
but yes, when we are conducting audit for ourselves, that is the first party audit. Means organization does the audit for themselves.
Okay.
So that's more like, that's commonly also called as an internal audit.
Okay.
Then second party audit is you're providing some services to your customers, and the customer is paying you for it. When you have a commercial engagement with that, the other company, and that
Hmm.
company want to make sure that you are following the controls as defined in the master service agreement or the contract.
So it's like more like a vendor audits.
It is like a customer audit or vendor
Okay.
audit, right? So
Okay.
that is because it's like one is a vendor, other party is a customer.
Okay.
Right. So that is called as a second party audit, because we
Okay.
have a relationship with them, fine, and this audit is coming out of that commercial relationship
Okay.
between the two companies. So that's the second party. Well, the third party is generally considered to be a independent audit. Means
Okay.
I I do not belong, or maybe the entity is conducting an audit doesn't have a commercial engagement with the organization. Fine. So they don't have any influence of reporting something with some biasness.
Okay.
Fine. So that's a third party audit. So certification audits, generally when you go for ISO 27001, ISO 22301, even 9001, and so when you go for certifications, so that certification audits are considered to be a third party audit.
Okay.
Those are independent audits.
Great. So, sir, like, when you're talking about how can we decide, like, we know that our first party is your internal audit, which is auditing the all the functions and providing an independent report to the board. Second party audit, when you're auditing a vendors, and third party audits are regulatory and all that. So, is the steps are also different, or do we follow the same steps?
So more or less, if you look at the crux of the audit will remain same.
Hmm.
Initial engagement will be different. Fine.
Okay.
If it is internal audit, you can simply send a calendar invite,
Okay.
fine, and give them the agenda of the meeting. It can be in
Hmm.
multiple pieces. For example,
Hmm.
you do one control at a time. But
Okay.
when you are engaging a kind of a, when external bodies are coming, fine,
Hmm.
maybe a customer or maybe a third party, then
Hmm.
you have to plan for the entire like activity, fine, so that
Understood.
it cannot be okay. We are coming here for doing one audit for 1 hour and then again going back. We'll come after 1 week.
Hmm.
That's practically not possible.
Hmm.
But internal audit can be done that way. Fine.
So
Okay.
is it possible? Can we have one use case of one internal audit with a sample, with the example and two-end process?
Yes. So even it is internal or external, fine.
Hmm.
Only the engagement part is different, because you have to,
Okay.
if it is a customer audit, customer will give you a notice as per
Hmm.
the contract. There may
Hmm.
be 7 days, 15 days, 30 days notice that we are coming for the audit.
Hmm.
They will give you then you will mutually agree on certain dates and times, right, and the locations. So then from there the process will start. And
Okay.
if it is certification audit, again you will first evaluate which certification body you want to go for. And again, same process. They will also give you the time. You will mutually agree on certain date, time, location where they will come for the audit. If it
Okay.
is internal, then also you have to look at the stakeholders' availability. Right? The function you want to audit, they mean if they time, right? And you have to respect the business as well, business priorities as well. So
Okay.
again, after we agree upon mutually date, time, location, we can start with the audit. So in
Okay.
all the three cases, we have to look at the availability, and both parties should be comfortable on the date, time, and location when we can initiate the audit process.
Okay.
So
So
that's
if
basically like kind of a planning of the audit, right? So when we
okay.
plan for the audit, so there are things we have to make sure, right? So what are the things we have to make sure, right? When you're planning audit, there are dependencies, right, on the scope of the audit, how big the scope is, right? So if the scope is very big, and if we have a challenges in the stakeholders availability, that audit may like cross the limits of the like, for example, we are doing the annual audit, fine,
Hmm.
and that annual audit is to be done example, fine. So if the scope is very big and we have too many dependencies on the stakeholders availability, that we may not be able to finish in 1 month time, and so
Hmm.
we have to plan it in different way then.
Hmm.
And also it depends upon the number of locations we have to cover. If there's a multinational organization, right, so we may have the offices in different countries, and we have to there's a one audit team which is covering doing the audit for all the locations. Then you have to look at the logistics, right? And again, availabilities, travel time, and if the visas are required, all that you have to plan in advance.
Hmm. So my question is like, if you take a one walkthrough of internal audit step by step, because it can be benefit for the people who watching that podcast, and might be it can be useful for the job interviews also. So practically, if
Mhm.
I say like vision and ISMS, we say we do first scoping, then we do gap assessment and all that. Okay, we are very clear with about external audit, sorry, third party audit. But when it comes to internal audit, they have their own IA standards and all that. So what is your recommendation? Like, what is the concept of keep it simple we can keep in this practice to perform the internal audit? If you can explain us with the one walkthrough of the one example.
Okay. So before we move to like differentiating internal versus external, when there
Hmm.
are certain kind of nitty-gritties of the audit planning that we have to look into.
Hmm.
So whenever we talk about the audit should have a set objective,
Hmm.
right? So objective can be in this case certification, fine, and for the second party it can be contract compliance, fine. For the internal, it can be the policy compliance as well, right? Or if there's any regulatory requirements of the organization, they want to have internal audit to make sure that the regulatory requirements are being met, so that if there is an external audit, so they are ready for it.
Okay.
So first is the objective, right? So there are three elements which we have to make sure that that is very clear, right? When we talk about when we are going to conduct an audit. First is the
Okay.
objective. What are the objective of the audit is? Second is the scope. I mean, how like what are business units, what are locations we are covering in this scope, and third is the criteria. Criteria means a set of requirements against which we will evaluate any business function.
Okay.
And so these are the called as like essential elements of an audit, right? So objective, scope, and criteria. Once this is finalized, then only we can go for the planning.
Okay.
Right? So now it comes to like if it is a I hope this objective, scope, and criteria is all like I have able to clearly articulate. Objective is why we are conducting this audit. Scope is what business functions and locations we are covering this audit, and criteria is from where the requirements are coming. And the
Okay.
requirement can be coming from the standard, for example, 27001. It can be PCI DSS. It can
Hmm.
be GDPR as a regulatory body, as a regulatory requirement. When it can be a contract compliance when we have the maybe want to see how well we comply with the requirements of a customer.
Okay.
Right? Scope is you will start looking at the availabilities. You will start making communication. Okay, that we have
Hmm.
to plan for the audit. Right?
Hmm.
So when we say the plan for the audit, we have to look at we'll make a communication. We'll send a notifications about again this objective, scope, and criteria, and look for the if it is internal, we can request the time. Right? If it is external, then again the engagement goes in slightly different way.
Hmm.
In there, the stakeholders, internal stakeholders who are managing this external audit, Right? So they will send a notification that these are like, for example, within the month of March, for example, we have to go for the audit, right? And we are planning the second week. So make sure you are available or somebody from your team is available. So we can send some a notification, because then we don't have flexibility of, okay, we can come when you are available. But in the internal audit, if we look for example, we are going to conduct an audit for the HR, we can look for the availability. They might be available in the first half, second half, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever. We can
Hmm.
plan accordingly. So once we send that invite, that yes, this is the date, time, place we will be coming in for the audit, then at that time, at that moment, the audit proceeds basically. Right? This is
Okay.
the how we plan basically.
Okay.
So apart from that planning part, right, rest of the process for conducting a internal audit or external audit remains same.
Okay. And when it comes to the audit perspective and all that, we if we're taking one common context of ITGC audit nowadays. In a
Mhm.
Big Four, they talk about the SOX. So can you share me any use case of ITGC audit? How we can plan ITGC audit also?
Same, the planning will remain same, but
Hmm.
yes, when it comes to the looking at the details of the audit, for
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
how to conduct the audit, or what are the
Hmm.
things we'll look for in the audit.
Hmm.
So there are three different dimensions of the audit, I will say.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we talk about the intent.
Hmm.
When intent means the process is defined, fine, and is documented. So that shows, and it is approved by the management. So that shows the management intent that they want these activities to be carried out in this way.
Okay.
Fine. But they have a policy. The policy sets a requirement. So it means the
Hmm.
management has an intent that they want to have these controls in place. Fine. So if, for example, you want to have you want to see in the PCI, you require the encryption
Hmm.
of the credit card data.
Yeah.
So that is not defined in the policy itself, and that is not implemented as well.
Hmm.
Fine. So it's not an implementation failure; it's a failure in the intent, because that has not
Hmm.
been defined as a requirement in the organization.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So audit is conducted at in these three dimensions. One is the intent is defined. That means the controls are documented, processes are documented, and that clear instructions are given to the staff what is to be carried out, how it is to be carried out.
Okay.
Second is that implementation of that process or the control is in place. And for example, again, the encryption of that CHD, cardholder data.
Hmm.
So if it is defined in the policy, defined in the process, but not implemented, so that means it is failing at the implementation level, by not failing at the documentation level, the intent level.
Agree.
And third can be like if it is implemented as well, but the implementation is not effective.
Hmm.
Right. So third is how effective the implementation is. So audit is done in these three dimensions, three levels, we can say. One is we look at whether the organization has defined those controls. Second is the organization has implemented those controls, and third is those controls are effectively working.
Okay.
Fine. So to look to do the audit, fine, we look for three types of evidences.
Okay.
Again, first is a documentation of policy procedures.
Okay. Three
Fine.
type of evidence.
Second is we have the interviews with people.
Okay.
Fine. For example, someone who is carrying out a backup. Fine. We'll talk to them. Okay, how do you perform the backup? Fine. What is the frequency? From where you're receiving the requirement? Fine. If it fails, how do you monitor if it is failing? And if it has failed, how do you make sure that any corrections are made? Fine. Or any improvements are made that it doesn't fail next time. So that's the
Okay.
interview. So people will talk about how they're performing the things, fine, and that also serves as a evidence of the audit.
Okay.
And third is the observations. When you see, okay, people are tailgating, and
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing yourself, or when you say, okay, show me the dashboard of the antivirus, fine, and it says, okay, 50% of the alerts are not being addressed, and critical alerts are not being addressed,
Hmm.
and for maybe past 1 week. So that shows, yes, the control is in place, but the output of the control is not being monitored. Fine, nobody is taking action. So audit evidences, there's a first control is defined, and then how well it is defined. Second is it is implemented. so that you look at the observations, fine, you see how the controls are implemented. And when you see the gaps, when or maybe you want to have explore more about how they are managing the controls, you can ask questions from the people. That's also serves as evidence.
Okay. And so when you're talking about the audit parts and all that, what do you think? What is the biggest challenge you have seen when you do any audits and all that, and how you overcome that?
So there are two major challenges, what I will say. One is the knowledge of the auditor,
Hmm.
and second is like auditors are always seen as a like negative people trying to find the fault.
Hmm.
And so that comfort you have to give, which is very easy in internal. If you're an internal auditor, and that's very easy. You can make people understand that you are here to help them.
Okay.
Fine. So any audit exercise should be seen as an improvement, it is
Good
being done
point.
for the improvement, to bring
Agree.
out the improvement in the process. Fine.
Agree.
And whenever we work in the operations, fine, every single position has their own challenges. So our mind also works in a like certain way. Find what is coming as a top priority, fine, and we keep working on it. So some other things are sidelined. So a independent perspective is important to improve that process. Fine, to
Okay.
bring the focus on what is critical for the business, not critical for your manager. Fine.
Hmm.
Sometimes we will just follow the manager. Okay, manager has said this, I have to do this. Fine.
Agree.
So that might be jeopardizing the critical things. Fine, what we have to actually carry out for the business.
Good point.
And so that independent perspective is important to bring in at that point of time. And the more regular internal audits you have, the better your process will be. Right? And audit should not be focused on finding a fault. It should be focused on finding the fact that how
And improve the
effective
process.
and ineffective, yes, the implementation of the control is. And
Hmm.
the focus should be only on the improvement process. And it also depends upon the style of questions the auditor is asking.
Yeah.
Fine.
It,
It
it,
should
it
not
is
be like
same like it is same like in a perspective of people say, okay, after the marriage, if partner asks some question, we always think in negative manner. It is there for improvement, right? So if any question has been asked, why you ask, instead of say, what is the reason of asking this, right?
yeah.
So same
And
like.
if you find certain issues in implementations, like it goes in every aspect of life, and if you find certain issues in any point in any relationship, fine, whether it is an auditor relationship, manager subordinate relationship, or the husband wife relationship, so we have to look for the solutions. Fine, don't report everything as a problem.
Hmm.
Fine, report like try to find a solution, help people resolve the problems. That's
Hmm.
the value, like because you are the SME. Fine, if I am coming for auditing based on the requirements of certain standard or the regulatory requirement, I am a SME. Fine, people don't want to see the problems. Even the management don't want to see the problems. Fine, if you just report this is a problem, fine, people will not like it. Fine, help them in resolving the problem, help them in
Hmm.
understanding the requirement. Then
Hmm.
you will build a better relationship
Hmm.
within the organization and within any dimension of life.
So, sir, like, you said about the first challenge is about knowledge. Now, there's a lot of scam happening in the social media that, okay, uh, if you want to become an auditor, do this certification or that certification. So, I want to ask you, because you have experience, you started your stuff from the system administrations and then you moved to security, then now you are into GRC. Now, as a human being, if someone want to do the transition to become an auditor, sir, I want a precise data because there's a lot of data is there. So I'm asking your practical experiences. If someone want to become an auditor, and is a non-IT background, so how to become an auditor and what should be the ideal timeline to become a auditor to get a job?
Again, when you say the non-IT background, I understand it in two different ways. One is non-IT means I may not know like how to manage a mail server today.
Hmm.
Fine, I used to do
Hmm.
this maybe 15 years back.
Yeah.
Right. So that is not expected even. You don't have to carry out anything yourself. You need to
Hmm.
understand how a technology works at a high level.
Okay.
Fine. and the nitty gritty is at very like the purpose of a particular technology. For example,
Hmm.
antivirus. Why there is antivirus? Right? To a high level, you have to understand this. We don't want to know how to install the antivirus, how to configure the antivirus. Right? We should be able, and when you're conducting audit, there's always a control statement, right? And that we look at. So the control statement might be, for example, let's take a very non-technical example: the policy.
Hmm.
The policy has to be documented, approved by the management, communicated, and acknowledged.
Hmm.
Right. So this is given in the statement itself. So we have to check four things now. But is there a
Okay.
document available? Is the document approved by the management? Is this policy, is the communication is being made in the organization? And fourth, have people acknowledged? When do we have evidence of acknowledgement? So
Okay.
this doesn't require any technical skills. Right. Yes, if we talk about the technical controls like encryption and all, not everyone, because the audit, when we conduct the audit in the any of these domains, right, the
Hmm.
GRC domains,
Hmm.
we look at physical security, people security, right, technical security, supplier security, and there are a lot of stuff, well, right, covers A to Z of the organization. Neither like one person can be HR expert, a physical security expert, and an application security expert, and the infrastructure security expert. And one cannot, you cannot expect one should know everything, but should
Agree.
understand the basics of everything
Agree.
and should know the controls requirement very well. Because if you are conducting an audit where you don't have the knowledge of that particular domain, you cannot do the audit. You have to have a knowledge. Fine, you may not be knowing the technically how to operate, how to implement, but if you don't even know why the control is being recommended, then you cannot even ask the right question from the auditee.
So your perspective is like, okay, we should know how high level technology or system works, right? Or
Yes.
the viewpoint is there. So with the continuation of the question, like, what is structured learning to become an auditor? There should be some structured
One more,
learning, right?
yeah, before we move to that, one more example I would want to give, and that will answer some part of this question as well.
Hmm.
For example, an organization is pushing the patches through the Microsoft System Center.
Hmm.
Right? So, as the auditor, you may not know how System Center works, right? But you know what the objective of this control is, this
Hmm.
technology is.
Hmm.
So, you should be able to only validate that yes, how the patches are being received in the system, how the patches are pushed from this system to the servers and workstations,
Okay.
and how do you make sure that those implementation of those patches is being done at the end at the servers and workstations. If this much you know, you can do the audit. You don't need to know how to configure SCCM, how to create the packages, how to get the updates, how to push the updates, or how to schedule it. Those things you don't have to understand.
But
So
but there
this
will
is
be some but there should be some baseline learning required. Like, okay, like if I want to become a security, I'm starting with Security Plus, which give me structured learning. So do you have any recommendation from that point? I'm not saying to go for the certification, but any structured learning. Because audit is very dynamic,
certification.
sir. Like, no, audit is very dynamic. IT, in IT we
Mhm.
have so many things. Okay, so that's basically my viewpoint. Like, okay, if we go for some kind of a perspective and all that, so what is your viewpoint from that point of view? Like,
Hmm. So certification always helps, and if you have the other supporting certifications like Security Plus, CISSP, CISA, CISM, that really helps.
hmm,
But that is not a necessity to gather the knowledge. Right. For example, if you are taking connecting audit for the 27001,
hmm,
so 27001 lists down all the requirements, right? And they have the associated standard 27002, which defines the details of those controls and extra controls,
okay,
which has each and every aspect of those controls defined. If one have that sufficient knowledge that it can read and understand that, that is sufficient. If it is not, if that understanding is not there, then they have to definitely start from the different angles, maybe Security Plus or maybe some other courses they have to do. But because the standards are defined in detail, the controls are also like explained what is expected, And if
Hmm.
that much, if someone is very new to IT industry, definitely they cannot do the audit for the IT. But
Okay.
someone understands IT industry, someone understands how the infrastructure works, has a high level understanding, then sufficient knowledge is given in the standards.
Okay.
Fine. Remaining, they should have the mindset of conducting audit. Fine.
Okay.
So I may not know everything. Fine. You may not know everything, but we should be able to ask the right questions so that we can understand those things.
Okay.
And new technologies and IT is very kind of very dynamic industry. Right? New technologies keeps introducing in the market. Right? AI is coming now. Some tools built on AI is coming. Right?
Hmm.
So we cannot be like keep ourselves like to the top of the line, having knowledge on everything equally. Right? But yes, from the audits perspective, what are the things we have to look into is first is again there's a intent, means again the documentation is there. What are the steps written in documentation, or what are the requirements written in documentation, process written in documentation, that we have to ask the questions about.
Okay.
And so that questions what we ask is we look at the execution. For example, if it is given, uh, let's say when a new user account is created, when you it is written that you will take approval from the manager.
Hmm.
When you see, okay, whether how you take the interview, the approval from the manager. The team might be taking interviews over the ticketing system, or
Hmm.
might be through the email, right? Or maybe there may be a paper form, right? So you have to see whether that step defined in the process is being executed or not. You don't need to be technical in this case, right?
Agree.
Then third is you will ask themselves, okay, how do you make sure that your team is performing all these steps appropriately?
Hmm.
Right? So they should have their own internal checks. They should have some measurements, some reviews they do internally. Right? That they make sure that their process is working right. They are not dependent on an external, like external means like someone out of their team to come and do the audit or review. The
True.
manager's responsibility is to make sure that all the activities in his team is going correctly, is being implemented or being executed correctly.
True.
Right? So what is the checks and balances or manager is putting in place to make sure all these activities are being carried out? That you can look at. Then how that manager or the team makes sure that the result is achieved of that particular activity. Fine. For example, in IT ticketing system, people measure the SLA month on month basis or week on week basis.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In a small organization, they might be doing quarterly, and
Hmm.
depending on the quantum again.
Hmm.
So that is like how do we identify, how do we measure that we are able to achieve our results?
Okay.
And if results are not being achieved, and what are they doing about it?
Hmm.
Have they planned any improvements? Fine. These are the like for the auditors, you have to look at these 5 steps:
Okay.
intent, execution, review, result, and action. Fine. That can make you be able to perform the audit of any particular control
Okay.
if you have this mindset. Because if you don't know, if you don't understand, you'll ask questions. If you can ask questions in this order, okay, what is the requirement, how it is written, and how do you communicate the requirement to your team, then how your team is performing it. So how do you review the performance, the team performing the any action is being done correctly, then how do you see if the result is achieved or not, fine, and then what the action you take if the results are not being achieved. And these 5 steps will cover anything and everything, any controls you can audit.